Hey everyone, I've got 3 arrow saws here. I'm going to go over each one, and at the end I'll tell you which one I think is the best personally, but I'll go over each one, show you how to use them, and if you want to see more in-depth detail, I'll have an individual video on each one of these arrow saws. But if you're like me, there's a lot of saws out there, and you're looking for one that's going to be a really good use for you, whether you're a DIYer or a pro shop. Hopefully this video will help you out. So I'll go through them all here. The Carbon Express arrow saw, the Mod Saw Deluxe, and then also the Last Chance Archery Revolution arrow saw. So this is going to be the most expensive, and then the Carbon Express will be the least expensive, and the Mod Saw is kind of in the middle, but it's still at a pretty good price point. So I'll go through each one, show you how to use them, and a little bit of details of each one. Alright, so I have the Carbon Express arrow saw here. This is going to be the cheapest option. Right around 150 bucks. You can find a little cheaper or a little bit more expensive, just depends on where you buy it. It is going to be the heaviest one. They take up about the same amount of space, this one and the Last Chance Archery. The Mod Saw is definitely a little bit smaller, but as far as lengthwise, they're all about the same. You got a nice scale here on the back, so it's easy to see what the length of your arrows are that you're cutting. And if you want to, you can make a mark right on it so you know exactly where to put it for your specific arrow. It does have a dust collector here, which is really nice, especially when you're cutting carbon arrows. It is a little bit a bigger one, so you will have to have an attachment if you have a smaller vacuum. And then this piece here, you can run it to your carbon, or if you wanted to, you can leave a knock on. I personally like to just cut carbon to carbon. So you can move this in or out to adjust it. I like to have it right in line so I know right where it's at on my scale here. So I find that to be the easiest, but you just lift this up and then you can loosen that and move this in or out, whatever works best for you. This is the most basic saw. It's just an arrow saw. There's no square or anything else on that, but it does cut your arrows pretty square. There's not a whole lot of moving parts, so it's really easy to use. And let's go ahead and get an arrow and I'll show you how to cut it. So like I said, I like to take the nocks off and just cut carbon to carbon. This is a factory full length arrow. I'm just going to go ahead and show you that this back end of the arrow is square. Okay, so there is no silver Sharpie on it. It's nice and square. Have the motor, big angle iron piece. This is where your arrow will attach. Like I said, you can loosen this up and then move that in or out however you want it. I like to have it right in line so that way it lines up right on my scale. And there's some screw holes here that you can mount it down to your bench. And the dust collector port here. This is a 10,000 RPM saw, and it has a year warranty from the manufacturer. There's a knob right on this back side. Loosen that up. Okay, so cut down pretty nice and easy. So I just cut that arrow, got it all sharpied up here, and let's take it to the square and see how square it cut. just a small fraction. So it took about 7 turns to get it completely squared up. Took about 7 turns to get it all squared up. So it cuts pretty square. Like I said, pretty simple, easy to use. You just have the little switch here. This one does weigh a little bit, but you're still probably going to want to clamp it down to consistently cut with it so it doesn't move on you. But it is heavy enough that it doesn't slide around completely on you. Simple to use. It is probably the loudest out of the 3 saws that I have, but it is also the cheapest. And when you turn a vacuum on, the vacuum's about as loud as the saw, so it's not going to change a whole lot there, unless if you have a really long hose on your vacuum that you're not going to be able to hear it. So good saw, cuts pretty well, and honestly, the smaller the arrows, I've cut it straighter with this thing, so it does cut really straight. Moving on now to the mod saw. Moving on to the mod saw, this is the deluxe version. They do also offer a standard version, which is $50 cheaper. This comes in at $210, so pretty good price point. I think the deluxe is worth it. That's just my opinion. But both of them are going to come with an arrow square, which is really nice. The deluxe version just has a little upgraded bearings. And then also this end piece is removable, and it comes with a knock insert, so you can cut them with your knocks on, or you can swap it out and just cut carbon to carbon. This standard version just comes with the insert to just cut carbon. So, and then you get a little bit more accessories with the deluxe. You get an extra blade and sandpapers with it. But I really like this saw. It's nice and compact. It doesn't shorten lengthways, but it's just really narrow. It's probably one of the most narrow saws I've seen on the market. The bearings are really nice. It spins the arrow really, really well. It's got a little wobble indicator here, and just a little few extra things that make this saw really nice. This little middle post to help stabilize your arrow is really nice when cutting. Just helps you cut a little bit straighter, in my opinion. A good blade, and it is 11,000 RPM saw, and it's super quiet, and you also get a little bit longer cord with this as well. I'm just going to go ahead and turn the saw on so you can hear it. One thing I also do like about this saw is the switches right here, so if your cord's way down and away, it's still easy to get to the switch. It's definitely the quietest saw that I know of. Again, if you're running a vacuum, your vacuum's going to be louder than the saw. So like you see there, I could talk over the saw and it really wasn't that bad at all. But most of the time you're probably going to be running a vacuum. And it does have a nice vacuum attachment too. Then they offer a different piece too. So if you do have a bigger vacuum, you can swap that out. But I'll go ahead and I'll show you how to cut an arrow on it. This does have a 2-year manufacturer warranty on it, which is a year more than the other saws here. But let's go ahead and get an arrow set up and let's cut it. One thing I should have mentioned before is this saw is super light. So you're really going to want to clamp it down or screw it to a workbench, which it has a couple attachment points to screw it down. So just thought I'd mention that. This is one that you're either going to screw down or clamp down because it will move on you while you're cutting an arrow. Go ahead and Sharpie it. Alright, so that one took about 10 turns to get it straight. So you have the blade here, nice support. This is also an arrow stabilizer to help support the middle of the arrow while you're cutting. Got the dust collector here, the arrow square, and the spinner there. Then this is the end that you can detach if you want to do the knock. Instead of carbon to carbon, you can just switch that out pretty easily. And then you have the screw holes there, and then there's also one other attachment point. So you can either use that or you can just clamp it down like I did. Moving on to the Last Chance Revolution arrow saw. You do have water with this, so it should be technically the cleanest cutting and the least amount of dust. Although I don't see that there's that much dust with the other saws as long as you have dust collectors. To me, it's kind of more of a hassle to run it, but you can run it with or without water. It still works either way, but it does have that. So if you're wanting to be really clean, this should be technically the cleanest saw. You get a nice arrow spinner here as well. So you get that, and then also it has sandpaper in here. So as you bring your arrow in, it can square the end of your arrow also. Get a couple wires here to clean your arrow. A little deburrer tool here. And it has a nice little gauge here that you can put your arrow in so you don't really have to worry about it moving on you. So it does hold your arrow pretty well as you're cutting. Also offers the option to be able to move in and out where your arrow is with the blade. So as your blade wears down, you can move that in as your blade wears down so you can help cut straighter. It is still a very quiet saw, and the nice part about this saw too is you don't have to worry about clamping or bolting it down. It's solid enough that you don't have to worry about it moving on you. So if you're somebody who's moving your saw all the time, that is kind of a nice option. You don't have to worry about screwing it down every time or clamping it down. So I'll go ahead and cut an arrow with this saw and show you how it works. One thing I should mention, if you are running the water as you're cutting the carbon, make sure you clean out your vacuum or your vacuum will stink. With that carbon getting wet in there, it just starts to make your vacuum stink. So make sure you clean it out. So after 4, this one is really, really close. It's probably good enough, but there is still just a couple spots. So this one took about 7 as well. So all of them are really close. The Revolution arrow saw, it took about 7. So it's pretty close to the Carbon Express, and the other one was just a little bit more, but not that much more. So they all cut really square, all work really, really well, and they will definitely get the job done. There is a little bit of technique you can gain along the way as using them. I am definitely not the best arrow cutter, so if I can do it, you can do it. Okay, so you have the water port here, and then the valve is right on the back. Make sure you have the vacuum hooked up if you are going to use the water, or it will run out of the back and run out of there. So a nice dust collector. Has a year manufacturer's warranty and 11,000 RPM motor. And here is the arrow square. If you do use that, Make sure you slide that all the way as close as you can get to it so it helps hold your arrow as you're squaring it. A nice scale. There's the brushes, the broadhead tightener, and then this is a pretty nice way to make sure it holds your arrow so you don't have to worry about sliding around on you. Holds it really nice and firm. And then this is really easy to move. You just unlock it, slide it. And these little marks here are what lines up with your blade as it wears down. You can move it in and out, which is a nice little feature. I personally don't use it very often. Got all three of the saws set back up here. I'm going to run them so you can hopefully hear the difference in them. So this is a last chance archery one. Here is the Revolution arrow saw. This is the Carbon Express. And here is the mod saw. Well, what do you think? Pick which arrow saw you think is the best for you. Please leave them in the comments so I can see what other people think of these arrow saws. I really hope that this video helps. These are all great saws. They're going to cut arrows just fine. And like I said, with a little bit of technique, you can cut your arrows very easily on your own. And all these saws can do it really square. I personally have pretty good luck with the Carbon Express, especially for as cheap as it is. It does cut arrows really well. But as I've played around with them, I've used the Revolution arrow saw the most. It's just one that I've had the longest. This mod saw just came out, so I haven't had a ton of time with it yet. But I can also get the arrows to cut really square with it as well. I do usually clamp the front of this down, so I don't know if that had something to do with it, with that moving back and forth. So that could be one of the reasons why that one didn't cut quite as square. But usually I can cut the arrows very square with it. They all cut really square, cut really well. Really, it's just going to come down to, do you want the extra options on the saws? And do you like, is carbon dust something that really bothers you? Then maybe the Revolution arrow saw is the way to go. Like I said, I've had this one for a couple of years and it works fine. So I've never had any issues with it. I probably don't cut as many arrows as some of the Proshops do, but I've cut quite a few arrows with it and it worked really well. I'm going to use the mod saw going forward. I just feel like for $300 cheaper, it's a lot better option in my, well, actually it's almost $400 cheaper than the Revolution arrow saw. And I really like the bearings on it. That's just a really smooth arrow spinner. I forgot to zoom in on it, but this little marker here is really nice for being able to check to see how square your arrow is, if there's any wobble in it or not. You still get a nice arrow square as well, and it's a little bit more compact. So I personally am going to try the mod saw going forward. Nothing wrong with any of these saws. If you're looking for the cheapest option available, the Carbon Express is probably the way to go. It cuts your arrow really square. This is actually really solid. Like I said, if you screw it down into your workbench or clamp it, it's not going to move on you. It is a little bit louder. You will have to use a little bit of attachment points for different sizes of vacuums. But other than that, it's a good saw. The only thing that I will say about it is if you're going to buy an arrow square and all the other stuff, you're going to be pretty dang close to $200 anyway. So you're going to be about the cost of the mod saw anyway. In my opinion, I think the mod saw is the best value because you're getting the square with it. You get the nice arrow spinner. So if you're trying to build the most accurate arrows, it's nice to have that. And this little support is actually really good. Like I said, off video, I've cut them really square by using that. So I'll play around with it a little bit more and try to get a little bit better with it. But for right now, If I had to pick a saw, it would be the mod saw. Like I said, leave it in the comments on which one you use and the reason why you use it. If I missed something on any of these saws, please leave it in the comments below. And like I said, I wanted to do this video to help you pick which saw is going to be the best for you. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this. If you found it to be helpful, please subscribe. It really helps my channel out, and it helps me get out there to more people to hopefully help them build better arrows. Thanks for watching. Stay hidden, and good luck out there.